Hi, my name's David Kruk. I'm the artist for this exhibition at Summit Artspace called Nobody Here. So I remember always like doing art as a kid. It was a lot of drawing, so a lot of like me printing out like pictures of characters that I really liked and then like taping them to my oven and then turning the oven light on and then like tracing pictures of like Link or like Goku or whatever and then hanging those up on my wall because I felt like they were like cool quality drawing pictures, but I was just tracing. But I always liked doing stuff with my hands. Like through high school, I was like drawing a lot, but I didn't take like a ton of art classes. And then even throughout college, I didn't really do any art. But I think it was like in 2015, maybe earlier, I took my first ceramics class at a community college, and something about like the tactile experience that just like totally drew me in to that. And I spent like all day and night in the studio just like wanting to like practice, especially like throwing on the wheel. It was just this totally new tool that I thought could do so many amazing things, and I wanted to just get like really good at it. And it was so meditative and mesmerizing, and I just loved this idea of being able to like make your own like wares and vessels and stuff. So I really fell in love with that, and then applied to Colorado State to pursue a bachelor's in ceramics. And then from there I did like an internship at the Archie Bray Foundation, which is in Helena, Montana, which is a big kind of like ceramics hub in the United States. And from there transitioned into post-bac program at Kent State, and then a master's program there too. So I feel like I've kind of like moved around a little bit with ceramics, and it's kind of interesting so far when I kind of like reflect on it, of like where it's taken me and sort of the trajectory that it might lead to. So I think ceramics is really important for me, especially to like integrate within like this concept I'm talking about. It relates a lot to memory, and there's a tactile experience with it, and it's also, you know, one of the oldest art forms in existence that humans have like started creating with. And so I think the history of it can still play a role and provides a lot of context for things that people are creating now. And when I really like to hand build. I still throw sometimes, but I love hand building. And there is an intimacy with the material that I don't think I would ever really give up, even though I am starting to like explore more of like the digital side of like how to create things. But I feel like ceramics is always going to be sort of this backbone of like my practice that I will continue to use, just because of its like hands-on nature, and there's an intimacy with it, and like it's a very humbling material too, in that like always having to be patient with it, and there's all these forces outside of your control that can make something go wrong or unexpected, that I really appreciate just working with something like that can always cause me to sort of like stop and reframe how I approach something. So this is a piece that I made or programmed. It's also called Nobody Here, which is the title of the show. But it's a video game that I made, and my original plan was to really not make an entire video game. I mean, it's relatively small compared to a lot of games out there, but still, I feel like it can be kind of expansive. I knew I wanted to do something with like pixel art and like digital game sort of stuff in that way. And the original idea I had in my head was to make some kind of just animated GIF that was like pixel art of something that I would have made or something, and just have that playing on like a loop. But as I was sort of researching how to do that, I was like also seeing a bunch of people making like their own video games with just this free software. And one of the games that I actually came across was called like Game Boy Camera Museum or something. And someone had made a game that is basically just a museum, that you like walk into a museum and there are pictures on the walls, and you can go up to them and interact with them, and it'll show you like a full screen picture of an image that someone had taken with this device called the Game Boy Camera, which was something that like, it was a cartridge that plugged into your Game Boy, but it had a little lens on it. So you could actually take pictures with this Game Boy camera and it would like turn it into pixel art, which I thought was really cool. But this whole video game like was pretty like reliant on that. And I really just loved the idea of just making a game that sort of interactive with like being able to walk around a museum and like look at pictures. And there was something I found like really fascinating about that. And that just totally inspired me to just try to make like my own game. And so I went, it was a lot of learning to try to learn how to make like all of the sprites and the pixel art from scratch, learning how to like make all of the interactions, all of the animations, all of the backgrounds. And so it took me several months to kind of like fully develop this game. But there's a lot of also just like free assets or like sprite art too that people can use or borrow. So there's a couple of artworks in here that are borrowed from some like user submitted content, which I think is cool to be able to like, you know, take or like borrow other people's creations, you know, with their permission, of course, and like implement them into sort of like my own design, which I think is like sort of another aspect of the show as a whole, of like basically taking these like cultural materials and sort of collaging them together in a way to try to like make something new. I mean, as far as like the content of the game, you play as this little Funko Pop that can navigate around. The inspiration behind like the character design of this little guy is actually like the little David Funko Pop that I made. And it was like a pretty easy sort of design to come up with, but I kind of liked how this guy just sort of functioned as like a little blank slate. But essentially in the game, you're wandering around this abandoned mall that has a lot of vaporwave aesthetics. And so vaporwave is a music genre. It's also like its own like visual aesthetic movement that was kind of emerging during like the 2010s, which is also around the same time that like Funko Pops were introduced, which I think is kind of interesting. But vaporwave aesthetics, there's a lot of like palm trees and Greek columns and like like Arizona iced tea cans. There's a lot of like corporate logos and like Greek busts and statues and stuff. A lot of references to old like 80s technology and like early 90s mall vibes. But it heavily relies on this idea of nostalgia and how there's kind of like an emptiness when we sort of look back on those times, because we were sort of promised this hope for the future of, especially with like 80s and 90s technology, when these like new technologies were coming out and they promised that it could like lead to great things, or like we could be like super productive, or it would make our lives much easier in some way. But it's actually kind of like inverted that relationship. And so now I feel like we're more fragmented and disconnected and stressed out than ever before in our entire lives. And we're like very depressed, anxious people. So now we're sort of left feeling like really empty, thinking back on times where there was like hope for the future, but now all of that hope just seems kind of like lost. It's a little pessimistic. It's not very optimistic, but it is. It's kind of like a cultural, maybe kind of analysis. Come see the show. You can play this video game, and there's also some audio that can accompany the atmosphere in here. So yeah, come check it out. It's at Summit Artspace, the Horizon Gallery on the 3rd floor.